finally figured out the significance of Paul Falstad's simulator. Excuse me, and Tesla's special generator. It is strictly a DC generator. And why magnetic resonance was so important to Tesla's special generator? Because of the tendency for coils to create back EMF. So when you increase the magnetic resonance of a transformer situation, you decrease the likelihood that it will become an AC transformer and be able to exhibit perturbations, shall we say, of AC occurring. And if it occurs, it's going to transfer. In other words, if back EMF should arise, then now you've got AC mixed with possibly the presence of DC, or else you suppress DC altogether and you only have AC, which is the status of transformers of our current day, made to exclusively exhibit AC without any possibility of DC arising for the most part. They've gone the opposite direction to Tesla's special generator. So that's the significance of magnetic resonance. The more iron you add exterior to the core but magnetically coupled to it, the more you suppress that kickback, that back EMF, and the more likely that DC transfer will dominate and AC will be suppressed. And it's in the DC that you get the overunity, that you get the growth of power. Paul Falstad's simulator, he only uses idealistic transformer models for his to simulate, real-world transformers, and they can pass both DC and AC quite readily. And so that if you have a situation, let's say you initiate a buildup from a cold start, and there's no oscillation yet. So think about it. Before the half cycle of a period of oscillation completes itself, the half cycle, you've got the opportunity for passing energy from one coil to the other if it can pass DC. Now, once it gets to the half cycle point and passes the AC, now you've got the capacitance kicking in from the other elements in the circuit that make it possible to augment that AC transfer. Because the back EMF is already going to exhibit some AC of its own, but if you get capacitance in there to contribute, you get an extra kick to that at that moment of reversal of polarity. So it helps build your momentum. But if you don't get started with DC transfer, you're never going to get any momentum to start building up at all. And that's the advantage of DC. It adds momentum to the risk, shall we say, of energy accumulating out of control in a direction of infinite oblivion. In other words, the ultimate result will be the circuit will fry itself or explode in your face or something along those lines. And the physical circuit hosting this phenomenon will be destroyed along with the phenomenon that is being hosted. So you have to regulate it, learn how to regulate that resonant rise. But you're not going to get it if you don't encourage DC transfer. Now, that's the significance of what I realized yesterday, in that we don't have to pursue, at least in the simulator environment, worrying about, well, how do I simulate magnetic resonance? How do I do that? By using parallel capacitance in the alternate coil. So if one coil, in the other coil, so you always have a minimum of 2 coils, and the coil that you want to exhibit magnetic resonance, a heightened, elevated magnetic resonance, you put your parallel capacitance in the other coil. Now, we always assume there's always going to be 2 coils on a transformer, minimally, or else it's not a transformer, right? But, when you look at the Amman brothers, what they did, a large-looking iron winding surrounding a copper tube at the center. That doesn't look like a transformer, but it does have, similarities parallel to Nathan Stubblefield's patent, in which in Nathan Stubblefield's case, he's got an iron bolt serving as the solid iron core. So that's all right. That's going to pass DC right there. And then, but his two coils are not copper. One is copper and the other is iron. And the copper is insulated and the iron is bare wire. Just like Oliver Heaviside's solution to the transatlantic telegraph cable laying problem that they had in the 1880s. Exactly the same thing, only wound up on a transformer iron core, solid core. So it's fascinating just to study these parallelisms of 100 years ago and how they went about doing things in a very similar manner, so contrary to what we do today, because they wanted to pass DC. They didn't want to just relegate themselves to AC transfer between coils. So you wouldn't think that a copper tube at the core of a transformer and iron windings surrounding it would constitute a pair of coils, much less, it's just so out of the box. But it worked. And I assumed you had to put aluminum powder inside the tubing to get paramagnetism to exhibit parallel capacitance inside that tubing, but I was wrong. The parallel capacitance appears inside the tube, not the interior of the tube, but inside the copper of the tube, due to the fact that you've got all the iron winding surrounding it, exhibiting magnetic resonance. But see, I wouldn't know that looking at the simulation of that situation, because I can't, in Perkley Spice family of simulators, simulate magnetic resonance. I don't know how to, if it is possible. I'm sure it is. You write some equation and attach it to the component, but I don't know how. And so I've discovered an alternative, and in electrodynamic theory, there's always alternatives, equivalent circuits for the same situation that creates the same math. It's a different circuit that'll create the same math to create the same simulation. And this is it. You put parallel capacitance in the small inductance of the copper tubing it's representing poised at the center of the massive iron winding, to put magnetic resonance in the iron winding, in the massive 10,000 Henry iron winding. That's why. And the motivation is to pass DC between the two of them, so that you can suppress AC transfer. Because if you do it enough, if you get enough magnetic resonance, the coercivity is going to be small enough that it's not going to want to change polarity. And when you reduce coercivity enough, you can't pass AC very readily. So for every 200 pounds of iron, as Dort told William Line, he was quoting Nikola Tesla, for every 200 pounds of iron added to a special generator, 1 horsepower was increased at its output. Yeah, because you're reducing the drag of back EMF, because you're reducing back EMF and slowly, gradually eliminating it. It's like an error, and you're reducing your margin of error. And of course, you're never reaching zero. It's an asymptotic limit, but you keep reducing it, and you keep gaining the benefit of that reduction, increased efficiency. And I've read on the internet many years ago how somebody had calculated by his experiments that if we were able to eliminate back EMF, that alone would give us over unity. That's the reason why our coils cannot exhibit over unity, because of back EMF alone as a factor, nothing else considered. Not that there is not other factors to consider to boost efficiency and thus boost the possibility for over unity, but that's just one. And if only that one were eliminated, we'd have over unity automatically. Mildly, but we'd have it. And any gain over unity is a gain because you accumulate that energy over time. That's why the reactive power can accumulate, because you've overcome the drawbacks of modern day line of reasoning, which has been inculcated into our brains over the past century, to make sure we stay away from it. Now, let me give you a little hint. There's evidence. All you have to do is look at history. I like to study history. It's very provocative. 1956 was the year that the first relay boosting stations were installed on the transatlantic cables. Up until that time, from the 1880s to 1956, there were no relay stations to boost the signal. They were strictly using Oliver Heaviside's suggestion of wrapping the inner insulated copper core with bare iron wire or bare iron ribbon. They did change how they wrapped it, but they were still just doing that alone. And it's amazing how long, and then why did they change if it kept working for such a long period of time? Because they didn't want anybody to stumble onto this little facet of how to, or first of all, why you would want to increase DC transfer between two conductive elements. To what benefit would it be, and how to go about doing it? They didn't want anybody to stumble over that. So they had to eliminate the iron-wrapped solution and replace it with booster stations sunk to the bottom of the ocean every so many, miles, hundreds of miles or whatever, to boost the magnetic component of the signal, or to retard. Actually, now when I think about it, that's the method that the grid now uses. That's right. There are two methods. You either boost the magnetic wave or you retard the electric wave. And that's the method used, the latter method used by the grid in today's system, according to Eric Dollard. You just go to is.gd/, what did I make this time? Space conjunction? No, space disjunction. Or I made another one, but I forgot. It's a recent one, but I forgot what it's called. I called it space disjunction, which doesn't make any sense, but that's what it is. is.gd/ space disjunction. And that goes to the exact location in Eric's lecture in which he talks about how the grid retards the electric field so that now the magnetic field can keep pace with it, and you can get a signal across very long transmission lines. By putting a bank of capacitors, enough to such a large bank that it can fill 10 rooms, every 100 miles along the transmission line to retard the electric field and keep them in sync with each other to make it look like you've transcended the speed of light, so that your sending of the electric signal and the reception of the electric signal, there's no time lag between them. It's as if you've taken the end point and the beginning point and joined them together and made them the same point in space. So that must be what these relay stations do, these booster stations. They're probably banks of capacitors. And so they could take out the iron wire, and so nobody would get the chance of learning, by way of just thinking about it, that this is what you want to do. Curiosity. People can get curious when they're faced with evidence. Say, what does this mean? What if I play with this and see what happens? And then they start to learn things that maybe somebody doesn't want us to learn. So all you have to do is look at history and figure things out that said, yeah, there seems to be a conspiracy. And it's not coming from government. It's coming through government. Government is literally just a pawn of big business, basically. And it's been that way for ages. And Eisenhower warned us about the association between commerce and military. But government, the politicization of science and its regulation by international bodies who think they're doing us some good, claim they are, like the International Body of Standards for Units of Measurement, prime example there. And then you get the standards of the Bureau of Units of Weights standard, who tested Joseph Newman's motor and blackballed him. And they literally admit on their website how they went about doing it. And Newman said they did it, and I investigated, and sure enough, they admit to everyone's face they shorted out his massive coil throughout its entire duty cycle instead of the last 20% of each duty cycle. So of course it couldn't amass any voltage. How could it? So it's amazing how flagrantly boastful the conspirators are, because they know they can get away with it because nobody's paying attention. No one's listening. No one's observing the situation and analyzing historical evidence. It's out there in plain sight if you care to look. Anyway, so this is why DC transfer is so important, because it means the removal of back EMF, and why you can approach over unity and maybe achieve it if to whatever degree you, dependent upon whatever degree of suppression of back EMF you can institute, by way of augmenting your ability to transfer a DC signal from one coil of a transformer to the other. It's amazing. You know, why bother? Why would you want to add more iron to a core that there you can't stuff it in there, so you got to magnetically couple it outside the core, outside the coils, to the magnetically couple it to the core of those coils? Why would you want to bother? Well, this is why. You want to reduce and eliminate little by little back EMF. Okay. Enough repetition. Have I drummed that into your brains enough? Now, oh, enough already. Don't say anymore. Okay, I won't.